At 16:38 hours, a Ukrainian strike jet obliterated a key Russian dam in just 4 seconds. What the world later saw as a towering blast was not luck, not chance, but the final note in a lethal sequence executed with split-second precision. When the Hammer warhead hit the Marka Dam, it delivered kinetic energy comparable to a 1-ton vehicle slamming into reinforced concrete at over 3,000 kilometers per hour. The impact unleashed a pressure wave exceeding 200,000 psi, pulverizing a structure designed to hold back 12 million cubic meters of water. A column of steam, dust, and shattered stone erupted 140 meters skyward, glowing white in drone footage. Within moments, the crossing that had carried 300 tons of Russian supplies per night collapsed into a widening fracture. But to understand why that explosion mattered, we need to rewind 8 minutes back to the moment a lone Ukrainian MiG-29 entered the valley. A jet flying lower than the rooftops. A pilot burning fuel faster than he could calculate. And a battlefield lit up with 6 hostile radar systems all hunting the same target. Because the blast wasn't the story. The story was how one aircraft survived a corridor designed to kill anything that entered it. And how a single pilot threaded through that corridor anyway because failure meant Ukrainian civilians on the convoy route would be caught in a mass casualty strike. 16:30 hours, the mission began. 8 minutes later, the front line changed. At 16:30 hours, the Ukrainian MiG-29 slipped into the pale winter haze over central Donetsk. No fanfare. No escort. Just a single jet flying inside a corridor so tight that one wrong twitch of the stick meant becoming part of the terrain. The pilot hugged the river valley at 170 meters, riding the contours of the ground like a shadow pinned to the earth. At 860 kilometers per hour, the jet was slicing through the landscape at 238 meters every second faster than the brain could fully process the blur beneath the canopy. On his center display, a reconnaissance drone streamed real-time coordinates at 12 updates per second, mapping every crane, checkpoint, and supply vehicle along the Marfa corridor. What once was a service road had transformed into a 37-vehicle Russian supply artery, pushing nearly 400 tons of ammunition and fuel toward the Eastern Front each night. And that's what made this mission so delicate. More than 60% of the drivers on the dam route were Ukrainian civilians forced into service. A heavy strike was absolutely off the table. This mission had to hit one point at 1 second with zero collateral. But Russian radar was already waking up. The first warning hit at 16:31, 14 seconds. 7 unarmored trucks attempted to sprint across an auxiliary bridge upstream. The UAV operator reacted instantly, dropping a 1.8-kilogram microcharge under the lead vehicle. The detonation was tiny, barely a kilogram of effective blast energy, but precise enough to snap the axle and halt the entire convoy. Predictably, the Tor M2 south of the river retaliated. In 9 seconds, it launched 29 9M331 missiles, instantly erasing the drone feed in a burst of static. Inside the MiG, the SPO-15 threat receiver flickered alive. The storm was coming, and the jet was flying straight toward it. The MiG-29 reached the final bend of the Dnipro Valley, the last stretch of terrain that shielded him from Russian radar. Ahead lay 11 kilometers of rugged ground. Beyond that, a flat agricultural plain, a pilot's nightmare. Once he crossed that invisible line, the hills that had protected him for nearly 60 kilometers would disappear, and he'd be flying naked inside a kill box built from overlapping Russian systems. On the right side display, the Buck M3 radar shifted patterns from wide-angle surveillance to a tight 3-beam tracking mode. To a trained pilot, that subtle change might as well have been a radio message saying, "We're locking onto you." Over the dam, 2 ZSU-234 Shilka guns crawled into firing positions. Not designed for jets, but perfect for forcing a pilot to flinch or pull off course at exactly the wrong time. Ukraine responded before the Russians could. At 16:34, 51 seconds, a small strike group of terrain-following drones swept in from the western ridge. Each drone carried a 1.2-kilogram shaped charge, barely enough to peel armor off a generator box, but perfect for eliminating lookouts without harming civilians nearby. 3 flashes erupted across the tree line. 3 posts went silent. And Russian operators suddenly had no idea whether they were witnessing a diversion or the opening seconds of something far worse. Inside the MiG cockpit, the SPO-15 pulsed faster. The S-400 radar sweeps, once casual and lazy, were now arriving every 1.7 seconds, tight, focused, deliberate. 8 kilometers remained until the valley opened. 8 kilometers until the aircraft entered a shooting gallery built from 6 different Russian emitters. And here's the question every pilot must answer at that moment. Turn back now, or commit to the run? The MiG-29 pilot didn't hesitate. He pushed the throttles forward. He chose to go in. 16:38 hours. The protective walls of the valley fell away. The farmland stretched open. And in an instant, the MiG-29 went from hidden shadow to exposed target. The SPO-15 threat receiver exploded into a wall of Tone's 6 separate emitters, locking onto the aircraft at the same moment. S-400 northeast. Buck M3 directly east. 2 Tor M2S, bracketing the southern tree line. 2 long-range early warning radars sweeping from 70 kilometers out. The S-400's Gravestone radar locked first 36 kilometers, well inside its low-altitude kill range. The tone shifted from intermittent pulses into a solid, continuous scream. That sound means one thing. You are inside firing geometry. The pilot had seconds, not minutes. At 16:38 and 22 seconds, he slammed the throttles into full afterburner and yanked the MiG into a near-vertical climb. The twin RD-33 engines pushed 84 kilonewtons of thrust, hurling the jet from 120 meters to 5,200 meters in 17 seconds. The G-forces crushed him. Vision tunneling. Blood draining from the eyes. Arms turning heavy as concrete. But altitude was life. Altitude was the only way to create a firing window for the weapon locked beneath his fuselage. Halfway through the climb, the Buck M3 achieved its own narrowband lock. 2 radar systems now had firing solutions. A third, the Tor M2, was seconds behind. The sky looked empty. But electronically, it was a storm of overlapping fire control beams, all converging on one aircraft. At the apex, the pilot inverted, leveled for exactly 1.9 seconds, and watched his weapon panel turn green. GPS locked. INS stable. Infrared seeker, 41 degrees Celsius and ready. Rocket booster armed. It was now or never. At 16:38 and 41 seconds, he pressed the release. The hammer separated. Its rocket motor ignited, and the MiG-29 suddenly lighter rolled, inverted, and dove away at Mach 1.04. The bomb climbed. The jet fell. 2 objects once connected, now racing in opposite directions. 16:40 hours. 6 seconds after release, the hammer warhead found the Marka Dam. It didn't just hit. It punched through, guided by an infrared seeker drawn to the concrete, which was 20 degrees hotter than the surrounding water after 8 hours of sunlight. At 340 meters per second, the warhead slammed into the dam with the force of a 1-ton vehicle hitting a wall at over 3,000 kilometers per hour. The smart fuse sensed reinforced concrete and detonated its payload in under a millisecond. What followed was a catastrophe of physics. A pressure wave over 200,000 psi tore through the structure. Concrete panels didn't crack, they vaporized. A column of steam, dust, and pulverized stone roared 140 meters upward, glowing white in the winter air. Within moments, a 50-meter breach opened and began widening by the second. Russian operators reacted instantly but chaotically. The S-400 battery northeast of the river initiated a rapid launch. 2, 4, 8, and 6 DM interceptors ripped skyward, climbing at nearly 2,000 meters per second. Their seekers locked onto the faintest heat signature, anything resembling a fighter jet. But their timing was already off. The Buck M3 fired a 9R-31M interceptor, but its radar confused the fading thermal wake of the hammer with the retreating MiG-29. The missile committed to a ghost trail. At 500 meters altitude, the pilot skimmed the uneven farmland, dumping the remainder of his dual-spectrum chaff over 200 bundles, creating a broad corridor of metallic fibers. Each fragment reflected X-band and K-band radar energy in unpredictable patterns. To Russian fire control radars, the sky detonated into noise. The Tor M2 tried to regain a stable track, pulsing corrections 10 times per second. But the MiG's ECM pod injected false range gates, deceptive echoes, spaced just enough apart to mimic a retreating aircraft. For 14 seconds, the jet became neither a clear target nor a clean miss. He became a ghost in their screens. And the Russian air defense network for the first time that day lost the initiative. 16:41 hours. The MiG-29 dropped into a shallow maze of hills west of the shattered Marka Dam. They weren't tall, 70 to 80 meters at most, but each ridge broke line of sight just long enough to fracture a missile lock. And right now, seconds were oxygen. Inside the cockpit, the pilot watched fuel pressure slip dangerously low. The gauge held at 2,050 kilograms, barely 14 minutes of flight at his current low-altitude burn rate. Any sudden throttle surge could slash that number in half. He held a disciplined 790 kilometers per hour, gliding the MiG like a blade through the folds of Earth. Above the hills, the two S-400 missiles fanned out in wide hunting arcs. Their seekers scanned 16-kilometer cones, searching for a plume that was rapidly cooling into the temperature of the surrounding farmland. The MiG's supersonic dive had done more than escape radar. It had bled off heat so fast that he now blended into the thermal clutter. The Tor M2 tried one last precision lock, its command link pulsing corrections 10 times per second. But the MiG's ECM pod kept feeding it artificial echoes, spaced far enough to appear like a retreating jet. For 8 seconds, the Tor chased a target that did not exist. Ahead, the terrain-following radar painted a narrow escape lane. 14 kilometers of rising slopes, blind dips, and tight banks. A corridor carved through the land, the only path that could slip him past the densest part of the Russian defense grid. Behind him, radar beams tangled. Missiles drifted. Algorithms sputtered. For the first time in 20 minutes of pure chaos, the horizon ahead looked possible. At the final ridge, the MiG burst into open air. The Russian air defense umbrella was thinning. The sky finally began to quiet. 16:46 hours. The MiG-29 burst from the last ridge and leveled out toward the western lowlands, a stretch of sky where Russian radars thinned into scattered, fatigued search beams. Inside the cockpit, the noise began to die. The SPO-15, which had been screaming non-stop, now pulsed every 5 seconds, then 7, then 10. Each widening interval meant one thing. The hunt was collapsing. The pilot checked his fuel again. 1,720 kilograms. Enough to get home, but only if he flew with monk-like discipline. A single high-G turn could burn 60 kilograms in seconds. He held the MiG at 680 meters altitude, steady at 790 kilometers per hour, a speed that balanced survival with fuel discipline. Behind him, the two S-400 missiles reached the edge of their geometry. Their seekers, starved for a stable plume, drifted wide and triggered self-destruct at 9,000 meters. The Buk M3 radar lost the Hammer's vapor trail entirely and returned to wide-area sweep, unsure if it had intercepted anything at all. And the Tor M2, overloaded with corrupted range gates, forced itself into a 38-second system reset. In modern air combat, 38 seconds may as well be a lifetime. Below, the Marka Dam continued to tear itself apart. The breach widened from 50 meters to 68, as millions of cubic meters of water carved through what remained of the concrete spine. Russian supply trucks began rerouting along soft dirt roads, an extra 49 kilometers added to every convoy. At 16:47:12, the MiG crossed fully outside Russia's engagement envelope. The sky behind him faded like a door closing. One aircraft, one strike, one window measured in seconds. But its consequences would echo for weeks across maps, supply chains, and command rooms. By the time the MiG dipped toward its forward airstrip, the sun was sinking behind the ridges, painting long shadows across a front line that had been rewritten in under 20 minutes. The breach at Marka wasn't just a tactical victory. It was a message. Precision beats power. Timing beats numbers. And a pilot who refuses to turn back can change the shape of a war.